Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Aanand, editor, Dynamic Manufacturing India. This is day one of Industry Samurai Conference and Awards 2021, which is going to happen for a week from today until 17th of December. Today, we have track one, which is the most important subject that we have picked up for day one, and we have some prolific and very well-known speakers from the industry. I'll introduce the subject to you and the speakers, after which we'll start the discussion. Now, the topic that we're going to discuss today is what will it take Indian manufacturing to build a global goods brand? We're talking about a global manufacturing goods brand. Now, this idea stems from the fact that the ultimate prize for any industry is the creation of a global consumer brand. The aerospace industry, for example, has Boeing and Airbus. The electronics industry has Apple, Samsung, Sony, and LG, and automotive has Ford, Honda, and now Tesla. A curious thread in these examples is that very few of these top brands are Indian. Of course, we in India have many powerful international consumer goods brands, particularly in automotive, but they are international rather than global because they are very well known for their quality, but only in a few pockets of the world. For example, not as much globally as we have the top global brands which enjoy an instant recall anywhere in the world. And today is the right time to, and this sounds like an uncomfortable question when we're talking about whether we have a global brand in India or not, but this is the right time to ask about these questions. Because having a global brand for an economy is an indication of an economy's contribution to the global manufacturing output, for example. So all the industrial economies contribute in double digits, for instance, to the global value chain. But India, for example, is not able to contribute as much. It only does about 3% as opposed to, let's say, America's 16%. So having a global manufacturing brand is an indication of how much are we contributing to the global value chain of manufacturing. To discuss this topic, we have just the right speakers. We are fortunate to have them with us. I'll introduce them one by one. We have Ms.Bhavana Bindra, who is Managing Director, REHAU South Asia. At REHAU, she is responsible for the profitable and sustainable growth of the company in South Asia region. Ms. Bindra joined the corporate world starting with the Boston Consulting Group. In a career spanning 2 decades, Bhavana spent a significant portion in the manufacturing and engineering sector with Cummins in India. She has made a mark in the industry as among the foremost industry experts with focus on automotive, mining, construction, railways, and power generation, among others. We also have Professor Amitabha Bandyopadhyay, who is the Kent Chair Professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and a member of its Biological Sciences and Bioengineering faculty. Professor Bandyopadhyay conducted his doctoral research at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. For his PhD dissertation, he studied initiation of protein synthesis in eukaryotes. I hope that I pronounce it correctly, and I'll ask Professor Bandyopadhyay in a second about that. Upon receiving his PhD in 2002, he joined Harvard Medical School for his postdoctoral research. Since July 2018, Amitabha serves as the professor in charge of innovation and incubation and runs the technology business incubator of IIT Kanpur. From January 2021, Amitabha is a member of the National Startup Advisory Council. He has recently co-authored a book titled The Ventilator Project, How the IIT Kanpur Consortium Built a World-Class Product During India's COVID-19 Lockdown. We also have Mr.Shailendra Goswami, who is the chairman and managing director of Pushkaraj Engineering Enterprises Limited, Private Limited, and Coherent Networking Solutions Private Limited. He is also associated as an advisor and mentor with Aditya Enterprises and Tanmay Enterprises. He has been helping the Indian industry in creating export opportunities for products and services through his network in 16 countries. A warm welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen, to the panel. I'd like to start with Ms. Bindra with the first question of the panel, saying that what all does it take to create a global brand in manufacturing? Over to you, Bhav.
I love the way, Aanand, you put the question, what all does it take? And I think it's a work of lots of theses, which in your question you're expecting me to summarize. So let me see if I can at least make a beginning, though I haven't done the thesis yet. But before I begin, I just also want to say a little bit, because when we talk global brands, today I represent this company called REHAU. It's actually a polymer solutions company, and we made inroads into the region about 25 years ago. And while the beginning has been with products we brought in, we set up our manufacturing here, and today are market leaders in the most of the segments that we cater to. So when we talk about polymer solutions, it's into furniture solutions, industrial solutions, building solutions. So pretty much a lot of applications that each of us can see, touch, feel almost on a regular basis. And I think, in a true sense, we've been a global brand in the space that we have been. Of course, that comes with decades of establishing. And here is where I'm probably getting close to answering your question. To me, it begins with a value proposition that we come with, and I think a value proposition not because it's a good term to use because it's what you can sell to the customer, but it's what you create. And when I say create, I think that's where you begin with the ideation and the research and development that goes behind the idea in order to figure out something which has so far not been in place. And to me, you took a lot of examples across industries. And I think the leaders in most of the space in manufacturing that I have known have been there because they have brought value in a way that has not been known to the customer before them. So to me, at the crux of it is the idea and the money and resources we put behind that idea to create a product. Since we're talking specifically from a manufacturing perspective, so I talk about what it takes to get a product which is so far not known. If we think about any of brands, you think about a Sony in the electronics, or you took Tesla, I mean, the latest and greatest that a lot of us have known. These are brands which are becoming or which have become as known as they are because of the research, because of the creation that they have put up. For everybody else in that space, it ends up becoming, okay, I am also there, so me too, in other words, unless you can come up with the next great idea in this space or to meet the need, like I said, the value proposition that can be offered. So to me, that's, to begin with, from a value chain, as we think about in manufacturing. The next, of course, comes in terms of what we create in partnerships with our supplier base. So it's not an idea is as good as its execution. I think most people worth their metal already know that. And as long as we have the right supplier partners identified and we have them with their skin in the game. And when I say skin in the game, it's not about, so I'm going to lose a shirt and a pant tomorrow, but it's about saying that I grow and with me, you also become much more stronger and a presence to reckon with. And I think a lot of global brands take their suppliers as partners and not necessarily just somebody who needs to sell me something. So whether it is in terms of technology that they assist them with, it is in terms of committing to volumes, in some cases even committing investments so that they know they are in it for the long run. And it is not a short term or a myopic way of looking at you or fleecing you as a supplier. So that would be how I would say from a value chain perspective as we talk about how global brands in this space have been built. And then of course, it's about which markets we target. And I'm not, the intent for saying that is not to miss the whole big thing around actually creating the product in terms of the manufacturing, but the intent is that if we are talking about volumes, a lot of the global brands, in terms of the space that they have created for themselves, and especially when I talk about, let's say, in the automotive space, right? And we talk about some of the age-old players, they have begin and sustained to create their strength in big markets, or markets where the demand kind of went synergistically with the kind of capacities that would give them enough economies of scale. So to me, if let's say if we talk about the automotive space, right, and we talk about, if we talk about early 80s, and most of us know and have lived through that time, when we compare India, right, and where we were in terms of ownership on passenger cars versus, let's talk about, the US or some of the other Western countries, it was way ahead. So now we are talking about a company that made its presence felt in large markets and then went into other territories, having consolidated its presence in a large market. So to me, the size of the market where you begin and consolidate your presence is in direct correlation with the capacities and hence the advantages that one brings to the table when it comes to economies of scale. And that has been, to me, the third, and I'm not talking necessarily in any order, I'm just talking from a value chain perspective, but the reason some of the global brands have made it to where they have made it today in terms of what they chose as their markets of entry, of introduction, and consolidation before they moved on to expand and to grow and make their presence felt in other markets. So that would be a third. I think beyond that, it's also when we look at the value chain to think about, the distribution. And again, the way I talk from a supplier perspective, it is about talking about even the channel as a partner. And there are tons of examples of how several big brands have made inroads across the countries. I mean, if talk about some of, especially the consumer goods brands, let's say Unilever, etc. I mean, they've really made their presence felt with the kind of partnerships they've done from a channel perspective. And I think there is no negating that this is a very important aspect of what a global brand needs to make happen. So to me, I mean, I've kind of talked a few of these areas which have gone into making global brands. And I don't think it's an either or. Some companies have done some better than others to begin with, but ultimately, as they go into thinking on consolidating their presence, moving across regions, each one of these aspects becomes more and more important. Of course, if I was to even talk from an end customer standpoint, or in some cases, if your end customer is not the one that you may be selling to directly, the point also comes is how much do we understand? And there is a ton of expenditure the big brands do in understanding, and not just as a one-off, but as a regular, almost like a habit, the kind of data and research they do in understanding their customers' habits, their customers' problems to be solved, their buying behaviors, depending on what industry we are talking about. Most of the big brands have a feeling, or have their, like they say, they know the pulse of their customers, and hence are able to continuously work on that. So it is not about, okay, I had a great idea, like I began with, right? I had a great idea. It needs to be executed. I have the right partners. I have the right markets in terms of volumes. All of that is going into making the brand. However, how do I continuously make sure I am adding the rigor and the vigor behind my brand is where the kind of research they do, the kind of data they collect, and the way they use this data. Because a lot of companies collect a lot of data with all good intent, but it's not necessarily used in the best manner. In fact, I know several companies where senior executives, and this is just a small example, but senior executives actually sit in their call center. So they kind of budget a few hours every month to listen to customer calls and to understand what's actually going on, which speaks a lot for the brand in itself. Now, of course, having listened to the customer, how do they institutionalize the whole process of bringing in the feedback, working on it, and then go back to the whole chain in terms of the ideation and getting into these partnerships and the economies, all of that. So to me, it's kind of a continuous process, and I think some of the big brands do a great job in several pieces of this process, and that's how, to me, they are where they are today. So I hope I could answer your question, Anand.
Wow. Uh, Absolutely, Bhavna. You said that you haven't done a thesis, but you presented enough uh, points of perspective, enough points for people to start a lot of dissertations in this area. Speaking of which, speaking of dissertations, I'll now move to Professor Amitabha. Professor, do share with us some of your recent work and also the answer to this question that Bhavna has thrown good light on.
So, first of all, thank you, Mr. Pandey and the Dynamic Manufacturing magazine for inviting me and giving me this platform. And thanks, Ms. Bhavana, for setting the stage. I will be speaking from a completely different perspective. So, as you might have realized, that I am basically a scientist. I do very basic biology research that is farthest from manufacturing as it can get. But because I run the technology business incubator of IIT Kanpur, perhaps the best manufacturing incubator in the country today, we have 129 companies as on today, and of which a good 60% would be in manufacturing sector. And these companies make outstanding product. They all make business, good business. In fact, our historical success rate today, 165, 180 companies have entered this incubator, graduated or continuing. Our success rate is close to 60%. When I say success rate is close to 60%, means that they have remained financially solvent after 5 years since the date of incorporation. They are not necessarily the unicorns, but they all have fairly good turnover, large number of employees, anywhere between 10 to 150 to 200 employees. And they bring in products in the marketplace. So that is the universe that I have seen, and I have now developed some idea about what makes them succeed and what are the challenges that they have. So let me tell you from that perspective. So see, like none of us spend a single paisa out of our pocket for a product that we don't need. Okay. So first of all, therefore, the products that are to be brought to the market should be products that for which the innovator did not feel that it is necessary, but the market feels there is a need for it. Now, when you enter that product, as of today, there are very few in the whole country that I know of, which are first of its kind in the whole world. If you are getting in, there will be similar products already out in the market. So then unless you have a differentiation, you are not going to get into the market. And the traditional mentality has been that Indian product, even if the quality is not good, if it is little cheap, it will work. But that is a thesis that I strongly contest. I do not think that is correct. With cheap products, you can sell once or twice to the same customer, but unless there is quality, you won't be able to sell. I will give you an example. So during the first wave of the pandemic, that is April to June 2020, many Indian organizations, private, public, they took up the job of making ventilators. Okay, because we did not have any. Imports was not possible because every country in the world needed. So making your own was the only option. Just like others, we also attempted. We made it. Some of the companies got very large orders from Government of India. Our company didn't. But because we had a very powerful task force with contacts in many places, so we could manage a few doctors, prominent doctors, to try them out, order ones or twos. So the company was selling somewhere around 100 ventilators a month between July 2020 and March 2021. Then came the second wave. And in the meantime, newspapers reported a whole lot about ventilators that did not work. Okay. Come March 2021, the second wave, whether it is government hospitals, private hospitals, individuals, everybody wanted only our ventilator. So from 100 ventilators a month to selling 100 ventilators a day is the escalation that happened. So the key to the success had been is that when these few doctors evaluated, as you know, that the doctors community is a very small community in the country. It's a well-connected community. So the word of mouth spread that even though it's an Indian ventilator, even though it is much cheaper, but the quality is as good as any imported ventilator. So the sale went through the roof when there was a higher demand. While the other companies, I don't think they had any demand in the second wave. I do not have their demand data, but I am reasonably certain. Now, see, what did it take to get that sale? If the second wave did not come, this company would not have been able to sell. This company would have been dead, simply because there was no demand. Today, they occupy only a one-year-old company. They occupy 18 to 20% of the total ventilator market share in the country. Under normal circumstances, this would not have happened because the imported ventilators would continue to dominate the market. Why? Because when it comes to medical devices, the doctors are finally responsible for the life of the patient. They simply cannot afford to take a chance on a device which may or may not work. They need solid confidence on that machine, which comes from third-party validation and certification. Now, normally speaking, you will go, any hospital you walk in, any equipment you take a look at, they will be FDA or CE certified. Now, that is not a very easy thing to accomplish sitting in India. It is expensive, time consuming, very, very process intensive. So what is needed on an urgent basis is a very efficient, strict, but friendly testing and certification regime, not just for medical devices, but for any manufactured product. Because until and unless the consumer will have confidence in the product, they will always think that it is reasonably priced because it is not as good a product as an imported one. So this mindset of Indian consumers can be countered if and only if there is a solid mechanism to assure customers about the quality. Companies that do not adhere to quality standards, that do not care for quality standards, they will die, and that's fine. So that is number one when we talk about, building a brand value. Like, it is not a secret that us Indians, we naturally gravitate to products made in Germany, Switzerland, US, because we trust those, even if we do not know the brands, we trust the systems in these countries. So such a trustworthy system has to be created in our country for manufactured products if we want our manufacturing industry to prosper. Number one. Number two, I will not name, but all of us, when we go to a hotel, we have seen that there is this bedside tea kettle that they provide, and it's ubiquitous, right? That means it is not really a very difficult product to make. Now, I needed one. In the campus, there is a shop. I just went and picked the first product that I found. It's an Indian made. When I came home to use it, I realized that no matter what song and dance you do, you cannot pour the last 10 ml from that flask. The design is such. I do not want to generalize it, but even if this is one example, and by the way, it's from a very reputed Indian brand, this company should have thought 500 times before they put out this product in the market. They have absolutely no sensitivity towards, efficiency and functional design. Now, this is not a problem of that company itself. When I try to help our 65, 70 manufacturing companies with, fundamental concepts on design for manufacturing, go to a good design company, not the design in the sense of website design or flyer design, like industrial design, machine design, design for use, ergonomics. There are very few, you can count in one hand how many organizations are there in the country. Because this, as Bhavana ji also mentioned that R&D kind of comes as an afterthought in our country. People think that we just need to sell. Like this typical trading mentality is so overwhelming that the finesse of product development always takes a backseat. You know, we have seen that, you know, like a brand like in this room, almost all of us have grown up seeing only Ambassador car on our roads. Today, that brand does not even exist because of lack of R&D, lack of innovation. And this is systemic. And this is where I feel that the institutions, research institutions, now thanks to government support, all the good institutions have very, very good incubators. They're well equipped, well funded, very good networked, and they're grooming good companies. So these ecosystem, you will see, will play a role in next 4 to 5 years. You will see the change happening, that high quality Indian products will come to the market, which my standard statement is that you cannot become a cheaper China to grab the marketplace. What we need to aspire for is to become a more reasonably priced German or Swiss product. And I think that we will be heading towards that. Government has done a lot of things which at present might feel a little painful, but soon when few other pieces of the puzzle are in place, you will see the beauty of the ecosystem. That is one thing that you may not be using a lot is called government e-marketplace or GEM. For all government purchases, now you have to operate through GEM. There are problems with GEM, a lot of problems. I know that. We are constantly having dialogues with them, they listen. But government is a major consumer in this country, including that of hardware products. So if high quality products are developed and they get the market that they require, then you will see that more manufactured products will come to the market. And this is very, very important. I would end with one note that we can come back to later, is the role of regulation in the country. So one of the mentors for the ventilator task force was Mr. Ajay Chaudhary, who is one of the co-founders of HCL Technologies. I did not know that HCL came out with its personal computer in 1983, just a few months after Apple and 2 years before IBM. And we know that where Apple and IBM are today in terms of global market and where we are today. So I asked Dr. Chaudhary. So one of the reasons was that in 1980s, and all of us have seen those days, computer was a bad word in our country. So there was no market, domestic market. While the Apples and IBMs of the world, they had a massive domestic market. When you have domestic market, there is revenue. You pump in that revenue into R&D and your product quality gets better and the gap starts to widen. We are seeing the same thing today in some other sectors, particularly in the drone sector, where the regulation has now been loosened a little bit in last 2-3 months. Even then, It is so crippling, stifling, that drone companies are having it very difficult to gather revenue. If they don't have revenue, they will not be able to develop their R&D, and every single week they will become less sophisticated than their international counterparts. And then we will turn around and say, look, Indian companies cannot develop international class products. But what we are being completely oblivious about is that we are not facilitating their R&D, which does not have to come as a grant. This is a regulation and policy apparatus that has to be put in place in a hurry. We need to demonstrate as a nation that sense of urgency, that if there are outstanding manufacturing companies in whichever sector, we need to give them policy support, not necessarily subsidy. Subsidy is the easiest thing to do. What we need is policy support, regulatory framework, and ease of getting to the market. That GEM piece is already doing that. The other two pieces are needed. And I am certain, if you go by the example of how Indian startups supported the entire country's fight against COVID during the pandemic, everything, like from the masks to ventilators to diagnostic kits to PPE kits, everything came from the startup ecosystem, and they are of very high quality. So that means we have the skills. Only what happened during the pandemic is, because of the desperation, a lot of hurdles were removed. So the going to market, the non-technical aspect was much, much faster. And because there was a demand, they could sell, gather revenue, invest more, upscale, better R&D. So a normal business cycle compressed in 18 months, you see a lot of high quality products that are internationally competitive. So if the same conditions can be enabled for normal times, you will see wonders from Indian manufacturing sector.
Thank you, Professor Amitabha. You raised some very critical, some very important points. And I'll take this discussion to Goswami sir. What are your thoughts on the subject, sir? So you mute.
It has been wonderful listening to Bhavana as well as Amitabha on various perspectives they have brought in about as far as global branding is concerned. Well, the topic, as Bhavana said, that it's a huge topic, very, very loaded question, Aanand, that you have asked. And certainly we'll try to do justice to it in few minutes, which you have allotted to us, of which we have already exhausted 45 minutes. And I think we need to leave something for the audience as well. But nevertheless, to begin with, I would like to say what I have contributed to the industry for 15 years in corporate sector, in a diesel engine plant where I was, when I left, I was managing a business unit from 400 to 8,000 horsepower. And then thereafter, 29 years in my own business, a group which I created in 92, almost 29 years ago. And we have been adding values. The value proposition is something which is a very good word to toss about, because it encompasses many things. You know, I would not like to say a particular element or define a particular specifics. The moment you put your vision towards value propositions or adding values into the system, you take care of many things. And that was my vision when I started this particular group. So what was those values which I wanted to add to the industry when the industry was suffering? When I started this in 1992, the industry was suffering on many aspects of manufacturing. Basically, when I was heading a business unit, I didn't have anybody who could offer me some solutions related to cost, related to quality, related to reliability, or for that matter, design and development. And this is where I thought that I should make this as my business and then start adding values to the industry. So I started reducing cost for the industry, which I reduced from 5% to 45% on a diesel engine, from O-rings to crankshaft, and on an automotive from front bumper to the rear bumper, any component or any system, you may have it. And which is where I was very closely associated with Cummins, one of the diesel engine manufacturers, or Kirloskars or Greaves, or a couple of automotive manufacturers where I have added values. Now, cost was the biggest element where I succeeded, and that gave me a lot of motivation in taking leaps forward in looking at manufacturing and adding values there as well. So what was that was required? That I created a vertical of technology forecasting. Now, in technology forecasting, we were thinking of really looking at technologies which will prevail 10 years hence. So when I was working in 2006, 2007, at that time, emissions was something which was being talked about. Although very early, I started looking at Euro 4, and then subsequently we started looking at Euro 6. So we worked extensively on Euro 4 and Euro 6, and the product management as far as availability is concerned for Euro 4 and Euro 6, and which were the gaps as far as technology was concerned, and then we tried to fill it up. The second aspect was fuels. So we had diesel, we had gas, and we have electrical mobility now. So we worked on all these three. And then there was another area which earlier it was very, very important, that fuel consumption was something which was bothering. So we worked on the areas of reduction in fuel consumption as well. Now, having focused ourselves on products, the times changed in 2014 when the government announced a Make in India initiative, in which we had to get into more value addition in terms of indigenous content. And that is where we started building up systems, or we became a local integrator. And in that products to systems transition, we created systems for gas engine, where today we have a complete conversion of a diesel engine into gas, or for that matter, to dual fuel, thereby contributing towards emission, contributing towards utility of fuels, contributing towards reduction in those emission characteristics, or adding a couple of advantages as far as emissions are concerned. Then we developed diesel engine safety systems as a complete kit. Earlier, we were supplying a few things on a diesel engine, but then we built it up to supply diesel engine safety systems. We created a system for pressurizing and purging systems, where heat dissipation was one of the biggest problems for large motors, compressors, or pumps, etc. So by creating this system and contribution of indigenous content beyond 50%, because most of the government tenders, they wanted the Make in India thing to work, and thereafter it got supported by Atmanirbhar policy, and we really pushed these two policies together to create these systems for heat dissipation. And then vibration monitoring systems, because this is a condition monitoring parameter that you sense the failures much earlier by creating a vibration monitoring system. So if your vibrations go beyond a particular limit, you need to look at a system to avoid future problems. And then the last one which we did was the industrial heating for hazardous area application, what we say classified as ATEX, for oil and gas applications, etc. So these were the pockets which were missing. And that's it where we added value, and then created an indigenous platform with a Make in India and Atmanirbhar policies, and then gave advantage to customer in Indian rupees rather than importing it in dollars. Of course, there was an element of imports in this, where we did import the IPR products, because development of those products in India was not viable, because the numbers were not handy. And that is where we had to import a couple of things. But then most of the systems beyond 50 to 60% were assembled and indigenized as far as customers were concerned. Now, having added those many things in my portfolio, as far as engineering is concerned, whether it is automotive, whether it is diesel engines, whether it is oil, gas, or steel, cement, we have more than 300 OEM customers. I could realize that we were always focusing inwards. So when you say what it takes to become a global brand, first of all, we have to change our mindset that we have to think outward. Typically, if you really ask, 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs in India would prefer to concentrate or focus on the indigenous demand because that is pretty well, meaning it is quite high. And when we say that third of the population lives in India and China, and even if we could grab that market in India and a couple of countries like developing countries like Africa or Middle East, we could have covered easily 40 to 50% of market shares. But then these are all statistical things. But what we are discussing is a phenomenon which is a global branding. And like you gave a couple of examples, meaning those people have really taken up that kind of a stand of becoming global rather than creating domestic markets or niche markets. What it takes is very, very important. The first and foremost thing I would like to extend my discussion with Amitabha is that we need a very, very solid and a strongly designed and developed product. If you really look at any of these global brands, what did they have? They had a very, very strong patented product designs and products. If you take Toyota or you take Honda or you take even McDonald's, we go on the other side for people to understand. You go to any outlet in the world for McDonald's, you will find the same quality. Maybe 19-20, we can always say, but then there is a design and development proprietary which is kept by these people and which is very, very rigid. You cannot change it. For example, we take Maruti Suzuki. They adopted Suzuki designs, but to change a particular dimension in a drawing for Suzuki is impossible. So that proprietary is created by the owner. Maybe it could be Suzuki, it could be Toyota, or it could be Honda. So first and foremost, what it takes when you say, I personally think that there is a lot amount of energy these people have spent in research and development. And the budgets which those people have it for R&D, I don't think we can even imagine. And this is the priority which these people have given. Now, to corroborate that design and development further, meaning if I take Toyota or Honda, they didn't have a lot of domestic market. So they had a vision of going global. So what they did is that they added manufacturing to it. So they developed the global manufacturing practices. Today, even we follow in India also Toyota manufacturing practices. So they designed and developed a complete manufacturing package, which nobody should be able to change it to come up to that particular product, which is designed and developed so nicely and so efficiently. Now, one by one, if we take the total culture of Japanese, if I take Japanese as a good brand as far as automotive is concerned, they have defined the product in R&D, they have defined the manufacturing as far as creating that particular product is concerned. And the third aspect, that they have spread it out around the globe. So in India, they gave a product, they gave a manufacturing standards, they asked people to manufacturing. Now in manufacturing, that includes the infrastructure also. Okay, how should that be, how that layout should be there, how the quality norms should be there, a total quality management principles were laid out, what kind of machines should be there, what kind of tolerances should be added. It's a complete package. So what it required was a domestic presence somewhere in India, somewhere in America, somewhere in other countries. And that is how they started creating. To add to that, when we talked about the product, we talked about the manufacturing standards, we talked about their culture, and we now are talking about their marketing. The kind of marketing strategies these people have designed, in which it includes the distribution part of it, it also includes their supply chain management, and it also includes their logistics support. So I'm combining all these three together because they become more of a administrative functions beyond development and manufacturing. So if we really see, we see excellence in all these 5 functions as far as the global brands if I talk about one particular automotive manufacturer or brand is concerned, as far as Japanese are concerned. So these 5 things put together have created that global brand, and then they have virtually made their presence felt everywhere in the world. And I think, having said that, I cannot discount what we are doing also. You know, the global brands could be fine, they are doing excellent, but then we may not have been creating a finished product, but then we certainly are very good tier 1 suppliers. So most of these global brands do have a lot of tier 1 supplies coming from India. And if you can call it a sub brand or a sub label to a primary brand, you know, we are contributing in some way. And the time has come when we have to raise our level from tier 1 branding to a product branding, and which has got to go global. I think, having said that, I will really look forward to some more inputs from you and the next question.
Thank you, Shailendra sir, for taking the thread forward in such an intellectually stimulating way. I would not like to break this thread actually, because this discussion has acquired a very nice flow, and I'll take it forward to Bhavana. Bhavana, your thoughts on some of these points raised by Professor Amitabha and Shailendra sir, particularly the role of Japan, the role of the right ecosystem in creating the right brands.
So, Aanand, great points, both from Mr. Goswami and Professor Amitabha. In fact, I was taking some of the thoughts down, and a lot more came to my mind. I think the whole point which Professor Amitabha explained in great detail on quality, which is how in the normal manufacturing parlance we understand. You can build a brand, but to keep the kind of reputation that you have, that is the cornerstone. And I think as we talk Japanese, and I know a lot of us own stuff which may be designed or in some cases even manufactured, we do, kind of have a lot of faith from a quality perspective, and that definitely goes a long way in building the brands that have made a mark. I just, had another thought, and that was in terms of, we talked about market, and we talked about, how global brands have made a presence in the market. And I love the example on the ventilators also that Professor Amitabha talked about, and Mr. Goswami talked about, the kind of work that he's had a chance to do with regards to the automotive industry, emissions, AVM, fuel efficiency. I've had a sense of deja vu with the kind of work that has gone in with all the players. But I think what I want to definitely add here, one, absolutely, there's a first mover advantage, and that point was mentioned, that when we are talking about, let's say, automotive, or some of the ideas that we are now very used to and find very commonplace, there was a time in the past that somebody did have the brains, if I may say very simply, to have an innovation with those ideas and to put them out. And so, to the point that was made, that how much more new stuff can we put out there. Now, in fact, as I talk, there's a lot of discussion around sustainability, right? The whole ESG space, and I don't think we should even go there because we'll be here till tomorrow otherwise. But the point is, there is the onus of some of that work coming in with the global brands. Now, when I look at it from an India perspective, and of products being put out by local manufacturers, the point we also need to know, and I've had some discussions with very established players across industries. There is so much potential in the local market that for a lot of players, yeah, this is enough. I'm good with what I have here. Let me grab that first. Right? And when we talk about global brands and we talk about them entering the market, we must realize the reason they are entering is because we have so much potential. So for me, rather than saying why haven't we become global, one, like I said earlier, yeah, we've been a bit late to the party because I mean, let's say the whole thing around the middle class, right? The great Indian middle class. I mean, it's not been half a century that we've been talking about the great Indian middle class. It's just been about, I would say, 2 decades or maybe a little less than that, that it became like this big done deal, which everybody suddenly noticed. But that is the point. That's how we have progressed very gradually to be becoming a nation, which in itself is such a big market. And for us to be able to cater to this market itself is a big thing, right? So when we are talking about, again, we talk about our favorite example, it's been often talked about automotive, right? I mean, yeah, the who's who is in the market. Why is the who in the market? Because there is so much potential. Now think about how Indian brands may be spreading, and I want to kind of talk about some of the not even manufacturing related industries, but we've heard of the names on Byju's, Oyo. These are brands that are going beyond and going in a big way and are becoming recognized elsewhere, right? Because they came up with an idea which was an idea to reckon with to begin with. It was a version of something that was existing, but it was different, right? So to me, one, there is enough potential locally. And so for a lot of players, let's first garner this potential, let's consolidate our presence, the way I was speaking earlier with the global brands, and then let's think beyond. The second, and this was something we had a brief conversation on yesterday, is in terms of the universality of what we put out as products and to what extent we can make them cater across the spectrum. A lot of times, and maybe this is a very unconventional thought, but when we talk global brands, we have a tendency, and I'm talking maybe on behalf of some of us, but we have a tendency of thinking about the US and the Europe. Okay, if we made a presence there, we are global. There is a ton of other markets which are coming up, just the way we only started coming up a couple of decades ago. And there are Indian brands which have been making their presence felt in those markets. Whether I talk about the Southeast Asia, I mean, you go there and you see Indian brands on the two-wheelers, or if you go to some of the African countries, you see Indian brands, right? So the question is also to redefine what we put as aspirations with the kind of products that we are putting out. If there is a market which is used to a certain value proposition, and now this is the third time you're mentioning that term, but there's a market which is used to a certain value proposition, for them, what we make may not always work. And there may be a large set of markets for which it can work, right? So for me, it is important that yes, we cater to local, we expand beyond the local, and we also start rethinking on what global means for us. And that to me will be very good. The other point that I would also want to take is, when we talk from an R&D or a skill sets perspective. Okay, so why aren't we making universal products? First of all, because we have a local market big enough to cater to. Secondly, yes, as long as there is a push or there is a demand, there is this whole urge to invest in R&D. And I love that comment that I think Professor Amitabha made, that we have this trading mentality. Absolutely. In India, it's always about pushing. Sales is all about pushing. I've got something and I'm going to make sure somebody picks it up. It is not about, like it was rightly said, the finesse of developing a product. And this is also reflected in the way we look at, the skill sets, our education system and the skill sets we are generating. Today, the number of BTechs and the value behind the BTechs that we put versus, let's think about MTechs, and how much value do we associate with them. Again, take it a step further, and Professor Amitabha, I'm sorry I'm stepping into your territory. I'm probably not the best person, but just a layman's or a laywoman's view. PhDs. I mean, I'm just thinking from the perspective on the kind of demand, respect, and passion that's associated with that level of a degree anywhere in the developed world. Or let's say, let's talk about US, for instance, versus where we are in India on that. And all of that is because when we are putting out products in the market, we are thinking about, okay, let's just get this moving rather than, okay, let me invest to get to the next gen. So for us, it's okay with where we are and we can do a little bit more. It's not about a long term thinking, about spending energy on the next innovation. But yes, I agree with the comment that was made earlier. Over a period of time, this is going to change. Not for nothing do we have the kind of startups and the money that's flowing in. But the point is, yes, it's begin later than what we have seen in the rest of the world. And hence, it'll be a while before we catch up. And perhaps by that time, some of the definitions and the perceptions of the way things have been and what has been built, which has been with a legacy where it was more of a first mover advantage, will start changing. So, a few additional thoughts, Anand, from my side.
Thank you, Bhavna, for amazingly structuring this discussion and nudging it in the right direction, I would say. Professor Amitabha, your thoughts on the points that speakers have brought up?
Well, I would rather like to do something slightly different. Instead of the points that Bhavnaji so well articulated, dwelling on those, I will take a step forward from a point that she made, and I'm so thankful that she made, because as an academic, it hurts me that in our country, training skills are not really valued universally the way it should be valued. I will come to something else deeply related, and we have two stalwarts from the industry. If they would take this message to the rest of the country, if you take 20 random global brands, I can assure you that 10 of them would have solid research done in an academic institute that was the foundation of the product. Now, I'll tell you, I also, the IIT Kanpur's patent cell and technology transfer cell, they also report to me. So I have a fairly good idea of what's going on. I sit on a collection of some 700 patents. What happens in our country is that if a technology from a research lab is at TRL 3-4 level, technology readiness level 3 or 4 level, industry is generally not interested. They will not even look at it. Fair, because industry would not want to invest in R&D to take it from TRL 3-4 to 7-8. Fair, no complaints. So now the academics will have to take it from 3-4 to 7-8. Earlier, government support was not there. Today, government can support you to do that. But in exchange, government expects the institutes to earn revenue from this investment. And that's a fair expectation. Now, when you approach the industry, okay, here is a TRL 8 level product. Please take it and manufacture it and sell it. Now, I'm sure both Bhavnaji and Shailendra would know that there are various ways of, ascertaining value of a technology. There are many different ways. You do all of that, you invest money, you bring in experts, and you do all of that. And then you tell the industry, okay, so you are interested. Here is the valuation we have arrived at. Let's proceed. Typical response we will get from the industry is, these valuations are very subjective. We can give you 5 lakh rupees. Okay. This, I do not know where it exactly stems from, but in general, disregard for skill, IP, R&D is something to be, like taken care of collectively. I would not say that academia is blame free. We are to be blamed. We are extremely slow. We are extremely bureaucratic. And we don't really have a drive for product development. We are very happy to do research and keep on doing research. These are our problems. But I can say that that mindset is changing very slowly. As a basic scientist, I do value basic research, absolute blue sky research, research for the sake of research. All of that is fine. If every academic institute, only 3 to 5% of the research is geared towards product development, the whole scene will change. And that is slowly happening. And slowly the industry is also, to share a secret, we are now doing things differently. As I head both the incubator and the IP cell, so I have visibility for both. And the young innovators, they have a whole lot more respect for technology, IP, entry barrier, and all of that, because they themselves by definition are innovators, right? I am trying to marry these two, and lately we have gotten quite a lot of success doing this precisely. And I would not want to belabor on all the other points, because both Shailendra ji and Bhavana ji, they are the stalwarts. They have already covered it all. And I just thought that from an academic perspective, how things are changing and what will eventually impact. See, like slowly you are seeing that all the pieces of the puzzle are falling in place. But I completely agree with Bhavana ji that we have arrived here at least 30 to 40 years later, at least. Okay. We won't be able to cover the ground. What we need to do is that in the newer technology segments, we should not be playing the catch-up game. That's where the role of industry and government comes in a big way, because if it is an absolutely cutting-edge technology segment, and if we don't want to play catch-up game, you have to invest heavily. Heavily meaning very, very heavily. Else we will keep on playing catch-up on every frontier, and that's not a very healthy sign. But the rest, things are going to change. And my ambition as a keeper of the startup innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem is to create such products from India which will have very broad acceptability in the international market. And there is a room where we can fit in very nicely. I am slowly seeing that happening. A lot of interest in our products from international players. Some tweaking will be needed for that market, But the reverse is also true, and that is something that from IIT Kanpur incubator we are trying, is to offer an Indian accelerator for global products, global startups. So some of these global startups have really high end products, but those are not affordable by 2/3 of the humanity. And in India, we have this ability to conceive and develop products at a much lower cost. So if they can be the guardian of quality and we can bring in the cost optimization part, together we can create products for which are high quality but affordable. And if this happens in the middle of Indian startup ecosystem, which is what I'm trying to do, then that will spill over to our startups as well. And as a result, you will see, quality consciousness, R&D sensitivity, and all of that. And as I said, that I am an optimist. I think in another 3 to 4 years, you will see a lot of good, high quality Indian products coming to the market. And it is also, I'm really sorry, it is unfortunate that I will have to run actually. I am committed for another very important engagement. So I will not be able to be with all of you for the final part. But I would request both Bhavana ji and Shailendra ji that please let us get in touch. We can certainly benefit from association with you. And Mr. Pandey, if you would kindly introduce us, that will be very good. And with utmost apology, I will have to take your leave.
Thank you, Professor Amitabha, for your valued time and giving us at that optimistic note towards the end. God knows that we need a lot of that in today's day and age.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Shailendra sir, your thoughts? You mute, sir. Sir, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Always, yeah. Well, there are a couple of points I would like to just extend what Amitabh ji had said on the industry academia front as such. Being a member on advisory boards of a couple of institutes here in Pune, what we have done as an industry perspective is that we have created that industry academia partnerships, and where industry as well as academia, they vibrate and they create an ecosystem in which we understand each other's needs. Because today what is happening that in isolation, we create graduates and industry does not feel that there is a fit. So why not industry proactively get into participation with academia and then create that kind of a package in a student that he could be suitable or directly absorbed on a job or things like that. So industry academia partnership is certainly there, and most of the colleges so far, maybe it was existent in the premier institutes, but today even at the district level colleges or engineering colleges or management colleges, these things are prevalent. The second aspect which I from industry when talking to the academia have been advocating is that there are no jobs. There are not enough jobs. So there has to be a change in mindset to become an entrepreneur. Rather than seeking jobs, try to give jobs so that the balance we can strive. And most of these students today are having that orientation toward entrepreneurship, and certainly they lack that kind of a training to become an entrepreneur. This is where, again, the industry has come forward, and a sort of a consortium has created some kind of center of excellences where industry, academic institute and government body come together and set up a center of excellence in which we do so many exercises having simulated the innovative products that the students have designed, and students are getting that kind of a confidence to really become an innovator or to become an entrepreneur. There is a small incubation center also which is getting established, and that incubation center gives them the first start as to how to run a startup or things like that. So maybe not to the level of IITs, which is being done, but then certainly at college level, that kind of acknowledgement has already stepped in. And every college, or for that matter, every institute of repute is thinking of adding values into the students' curriculum and syllabus, and thereby making them job ready or ready for the entrepreneurship exercises which they are taking. Having said these things in continuation to what Amitabh had said, I would like to also get into that aspect. I think somewhere down the line we discussed this, that what is global means. Meaning when we say global, whether it means America, whether it means Europe, or whether it means what. And the second question naturally is that why global? Meaning, is that something which is ultimate that people would like to do? Maybe some people would like to produce a good product, and if it gets sold globally, fine. But then, should that be the aim? So every industry, for that matter, or every company has to take this into their consideration in the think tank. They have it, and then try to understand what it means to be global and why they should become global, because it really involves a lot many things which we just discussed a few minutes ago. There were a couple of markets which opened because of this pandemic. As we said that the markets drive innovation, and such drives were seen when this pandemic struck us. In last 2 years, lifestyles changes that took place, the habits changed, the industry performances changed, the work styles in the industry changed. We started working from home, and then we could realize that we could not do many things and still remain the same. So there were a lot of expenditures which we were doing. They were absolutely of no use. And that self-realization has come about. In this conundrum, something emerged out that was e-commerce. And I don't know whether we should get that into the kind of a product or service that one is really looking at. And e-commerce really hit the nail. And a company like Zomato became global just within no time period of 2 years. Maybe pre-COVID, we were not used to so many e-commerce platforms as much as we are now used to. Even if we have a choice of going to the markets and then doing our own purchases or buying, but then we still resort to online purchases because they have become more fluent, their quality is good, the delivery is good, the prices are good. In fact, prices are more competitive. So a company like Zomato has become suddenly, I won't know whether it should be called as global, but then certainly they have become international. It has gone beyond India as such. Now, manufacturing, when we have been discussing, and the excellence in manufacturing that we have been discussing, 10 years ago, when we used to travel overseas, people never really took us very, very seriously because we did not have that kind of a standard as far as manufacturing was concerned. But today, I can proudly say that, yes, in India, we have reached that level where we could discuss the PPM levels when we are trying to work out the product strategies. And then we are taking care of all those quality principles and all those manufacturing sequences, and we're trying to come up very well as far as global demands are concerned. And this is where I think most of the global companies are looking at India as a substitute to China. After meaning so far, manufacturing means China. Everyone knew it, that the kind of cost one doesn't. I always had that debate on how do they manage that kind of a cost when across the board the raw materials are same, the machines are the same. It could be simply about the manpower, and then the manpower doesn't contribute so much in a process. But then today, that question is ruled out because then we are not competing in every market with the products coming out of China or maybe the Eastern countries. But then people have realized that India could become manufacturing base, and certainly there are other countries in line like Vietnam is there, or maybe South American countries where Mexico or Brazil, some people may think about because of the logistics part of it, or erstwhile East European countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other places. But then certainly we could play a role as far as manufacturing is concerned and go global. In this, again, I'm coming to the same point that maybe on a finished product, we may not, but on certainly at tier 1 level or component supplies, we can certainly be a global brand which could be recognized.
Thank you so much, Shailendra sir, for that positive note. Now we have questions from the audience. There are 2 questions in particular. That please see if you'd like to take up that question. The first one is on 3D printing. Now, Bhavana, your company REHAU has a 3D printing solution. In fact, was able to make a 3D touch sensor in collaboration with Nano Dimension last year, I believe. So it has some solutions in this area. But overall, in terms of 3D printing technology, what can be done on a global scale from an Indian perspective?
I think, I mean, the whole intent with 3D printing is already catching up, and everybody's seen the advantage for it, whether it's in terms of reducing the development time frames or it is in terms, I mean, faster way to market. So to me, I think there's work to be done from a 3D printing perspective as I look at the question, on what is that potential revenue stream at a global scale. I think the numbers are huge. The point is on the speed at which across industries this can be made pervasive. And there's obviously work to be done in terms of the actual material being used from a printing perspective, the machinery, and then making it something that customers are comfortable with, because obviously we've had different ways and means to achieve the same results in the past. So it is about constantly being at it in terms of innovating from a materials as well as machinery perspective and exploring the avenues across industries. I think there is a lot more that can be done within India for India, as well as within India for the rest of the world. And I think we are at the tip of the iceberg right now. So that's
Thanks,
how
Bhavana.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Shailendra sir. Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm not used to muting it actually. So sorry, I'm not into the 3D printing zone, so I think I won't be able to contribute a lot on this. You have to unmute. Aanand, you have to unmute.
Oh, sorry. So the next question is from Raghavendra, and that is based on one point that you raised during. So you said that Toyota management system, for example, is a great thing from Japan that has influenced product development all over the world and manufacturing as well. The question from Raghavendra is that Toyota management system is being used on all big brands, How to bring these systems to MSME, which is the backbone of Indian industry? As I see, even a good initiative like Z program has failed. And I think he's talking about zero defects in program that was initiated under the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme. Your thoughts?
Yeah. The thing is that Toyota management system or manufacturing system, certainly what he says is absolutely right. that it was created by Toyota, which is a global brand, one of the world's best car manufacturers. And naturally, it involved many aspects. For using that system in toto as it is going to be a challenge as far as MSMEs are concerned. So we have to scale it down. We have to take the crux of that, or other philosophy of that Toyota manufacturing, which defines what should be the process, how should be a layout be organized, how should one look at the inventory, how should we break up that inventory, what are those inventory turns that we need to put it on shop floor and we need to put it in stores. What kind of a quality one is required to look at on each step of manufacturing and things like that. Now, to simplify for MSME, if we really build up the accreditation standards, what we have it as ISO 9001 for manufacturing, it could be 14001 for the company, it could be a different one. Now, these standards, they certainly talk about the processes or the activities that you do, you document it. And the moment you document it, you keep on doing the same thing what you have documented. So it is the repetitive accuracy with which, if you do that kind of a process or incorporate in your manufacturing, I think you should be able to sail through. One has to take that, it's like a Taj Mahal. Everyone doesn't live in a Taj Mahal. So you have to scale it down to the level of MSME and then take the best out of that.
Thank you, Shailendra sir. Bhavana, you would like to add to that?
No, I think I had exactly similar thoughts. I love the Taj Mahal example. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to go, it's like 0 to 100. Any improvement above 0 is infinite improvement anyways. So I think it's about, step by step, like they say, eating what you can digest and not overstuffing yourself such that it's going to cause more trouble than anything. And that's how we need to go about it. I mean, there's no two ways. We can put in the aspiration, but it's always a step-by-step approach. Need not push it all the way.
Wow, aspiration, that is the right word to sum up this discussion that we've had today. And to be honest, in the beginning of the discussion, I had this lingering fear that this is a topic that could very easily devolve into a discussion where emotions run high and facts take a back seat. Such was the nature, but I'm so glad that we had such experts who took such an informed view of the discussion and left us much more informed, much wiser, especially our readers. This is going to go a long way in informing our readers about manufacturing, about what role aspirations, what role trust, for example. That's a huge thing that came out of this discussion, the factor of trust. I remember, just to add a little bit, a two-bit of mine, that I recently read a New York Times article where they spoke about how Taiwan's TSMC managed to occupy such a big space in chip manufacturing. And the one thing that the columnist said, and I think it was Thomas Friedman who spoke about, the earth is flat in terms of business. So this author, he says that it was the trust factor. The TSMC, it's not the capital investment at the right time and the opportunity and all. This company has managed to collaborate with the biggest technology companies in the world, whether it is Apple, whether it is Samsung, across the space from different economies in one company. So they are able to share their innovation with this company with such an amount of trust. And that has been the difference that this company has brought into the equation. And I believe that is one big message that goes out of this discussion to our audiences today, to build the trust, the partnership, the collaboration in building the aspiration that we're able to have more global brands coming out of India. Thank you so much, Bhavana. Thank you so much, Shailendra sir, for being a part of this discussion. You have a brilliant day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.